What's going on, ladies and gents? This is Bento with another Steam controller playtest, and this time I'm going to be doing it on Saints Row 4. I think Saints Row 4 has enough death, destruction, mayhem, open worldness, and superpowers to really just make playing it on the Steam controller a lot of fun. And it's also nice, I guess, to revisit as well. So for my actual control scheme, I am using the a gamepad setup this time. And that's primarily because I think the Saints Row 4 controls on the regular gamepad are actually pretty good as they are. The only real additions I actually have are the right trackpad and the mouse input, or the gyro input, as well as the grip buttons. So in terms of controls, it is actually the control scheme you'd find on the regular gamepad. So the left trigger is to aim, right trigger being to shoot, and to melee if you have a melee weapon as well. The left bumper is to go into your superpowered sprint. The right bumper is to activate your currently selected power. And to select your power, you use that on the D-pad, or the left trackpad in this case. I am using touch this time because I thought it'd be more fun to use and just more easier to access. The left thumbstick is obviously just to move, and to click it would just go into crouch mode, or just make you crouch. Right trackpad, this time I am actually using a mouse style of input with trackball motion on, and that's just because I think it really helps. I mean, I typically use it for almost all my games, but I think it's very helpful just because I can really pan the camera, especially in a third-person game. The face buttons are also typical, or they are the same. The Y button is to interact, and the B button is to go into your radio wheel. The A button is to jump, and your X button is to reload. Let me bring up a gun real quick. The new additions I decided to include are the grips. So the left grip is to go into your sprint mode, and the right grip is to go into jump. The select and start are just very typical. Select is your inventory, and start is your pause button. So very typical controls, not a lot of configuring. But let's show you guys some actual gameplay and let's talk more about it. Since Saints Row is more of an open world action game, I'm not really doing any particular mission. I'm just going about trying to do a whole bunch of other side things. So trying to disable these generators. You'll see me just running around town trying to get SIDS and all that. And so I thought that might be a good way to show some gameplay. In terms of how the controller feels with Saints Row 4, I think it's really good. If you're kind of familiar with Saints Row on the regular gamepad, it's honestly nothing new, just for this particular control scheme, because I just wanted to keep it the same. The nice thing about Saints Row is that it's very hybrid controller and keyboard friendly, so hybrid setups work really well. But if you want, you can still do a pure keyboard or gamepad setup. In fact, the mouse and joystick camera movement was actually really good this game, but I think the mouse style of input still has a bit more smoothing advantage, and so that's why I'm actually using it. The only real drawback is that the tooltip hints will be displayed in keyboard and mouse format if you were to use the right trackpad last. And the same thing applies for the gamepad, where it will actually show its controls as well. But if it does get bothersome, then switching the motion controls and the right trackpad to a mouse joystick style of input still works very well. I actually found motion controls to be very helpful in two specific ways. The first is that, well, obviously aiming feels really good. I can cycle between targets much faster, lining up headshots feels much more accurate. And the second is actually going into your super sprint and turning the camera with your motion controls. And I'll explain that in a bit later when you'll see some actual sprints. I guess the nice thing too is that even though it says E to disable the generator right now, I'm actually using the Y key, and so it doesn't disable the gamepad or controller when you're using both. As for the actual controller setup, I actually really like Saints Row controls on the gamepad, and so I didn't really feel the need to map things differently. But I did want to add some level of configuration with the grips, the motion control, and the trackpad. I think having jump and sprint on my left and right grips felt really good. They did help a lot because instead of having to jump with my thumb on the A button, I can just jump with my right fingers, and then I can still actually keep camera control. Having the sprint on the left grip isn't that big of a change, but it definitely makes maneuvering a little more comfortable than having to use your finger to hit the left bumper. At least for me though. Alternatively, if you want to be a little more combat focused, I think you can use your right bumper power to be on your right grip instead. And so that way you can just shoot and aim and actually use your powers at the same time, so you don't have to take your finger off the right trigger. And so that way you'll be shooting and using your powers at the same time.
I should battle my awesomeness.
If you prefer to select your weapons and powers on the fly rather than having to use the radial wheel, which is on the B button, you can always just use a touch menu and you'll have instant access to all the weapons and powers. So now that combat is over and I'm pretty much in my flash mode, I do use a combination of the right trackpad and the motion controls when I need to turn while I'm sprinting, and sort of the same thing when I'm gliding in the air. But turning when you're on the ground with your motion controls feels really smooth. It actually feels really comfortable, and I actually prefer it over using the right trackpad to turn. So in that case, if you have a racing game, and unfortunately I don't really have too many of those, well, any good ones at least, mapping motion control to be your wheel might actually be pretty good. I'm sure some of you guys have tried it already, but if ever I get a racing game, I will probably give it a spin. But having the jump and sprint on my left and right grips feel really good while traversing the city. It actually feels really relaxing because I don't have to press my A button too much, and so I can still control my camera while being able to jump like amazing heights. So we're just about to finish up, guys. I really like Saints Row for the Steam controller. Even though I didn't really tinker around too much with it because I much prefer the original gamepad controls, you guys can customize it however you want. But I do recommend you make use of the grip buttons as well as the motion controls. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all next time.